Hello, thank you all for joining. My name is Marlene.
My name is Sonja, and we both from Borderline Berlin.
Exactly, Borderline Europe, based in Berlin, and welcome you all to tonight's webinar, the externalization of the EU borders in the Western Balkans. Today, with our guests, we will take a closer look at the situation of refugees and migrants in Serbia and Bosnia and Herzegovina. Just to clarify, we as hosts, Sonja and me, will use the term people on the move to avoid categorizing with the term refugees and migrants. The region that we're going to talk about tonight has been a transit area for people moving towards Central and Western Europe for a longer time, and this corridor, as most of you know, got kind of officialized in 2015. But then, when the borders were reinforced, people basically stranded, mostly in Serbia at that time. As of today, thousands of people are still stuck in Serbia and Bosnia, in inhumane, dire conditions, with a lack of access to protection and asylum, lack of access to healthcare, education, etc. We will hear much more about that later on. And of course, the situation has also deteriorated due to the coronavirus outbreak. But aside from this, we will also look at the complex relations between Serbia and Bosnia and the European Union, as well as power relations at play regarding the EU accession process. What we see today in the region is an emergence of authoritarian leaders, right-wing groups, and all that unfolding in front of a not so long ago war in the 90s that has left its marks on the region and its people. Even though we have limited time, we want to bring those aspects together and discuss the impacts of EU migration policies on this region.
So since you probably know our title, which is the externalization of borders, we want to clarify what do we actually mean when we talk about externalization. Externalization is the outsourcing of border control, meaning that the border control, or the goal of not wanting to have people inside Europe, which kind of the migration policy is at the moment, gets sourced out more and more away from the European Union itself. For that, the European Union cooperates with third state countries and kind of offers them benefits, which can be visa liberation, which can be money, which can be founding, to either hinder people from even leaving their country of origin or stopping them while they're on the route, which, for example, is the case in Serbia and Bosnia. In Bosnia and Serbia are countries who have signed agreements with the European Union and also with Frontex. So Serbia at the moment allows Frontex troops on its grounds, which is very new since this May, while in Bosnia this agreement kind of got stuck, but it's more due to internal conflicts of the Bosnian state. So it's very possible that this agreement will be to discussion again, and there's definitely already agreements to secure the borders to keep people from reaching the European border. So the whole migration process, or the whole migration itself, gets more and more discussed in a field of security and not in a field of humanity. So we are very happy to welcome our guests, Milica Svabic from Serbia and Erich Rathfelder, based in Bosnia and in Croatia. And to get our events started, we would like to start with two statements from our guests and then start with our discussions.
My name is Milica Svabic, and I am a human rights lawyer and activist in Serbian-based NGO Click Active Center for Development of Social Policies. I started working in the field of asylum before the 2015 refugee crisis, when people on the move were not in the public eye, and I followed it as it developed from the welcoming initiative in 2015 to the closure of the EU borders, setting up fences, violent pushbacks from the police and international agencies, as well as other attempts of the migration externalization away from the EU territory. The vast majority of people does not have access to asylum, and in most cases they cannot fulfill basic needs within the system, such as food, healthcare, or education. In addition, people on the move in Serbia are facing with the rise of extreme far-right and fascist groups who seem to be acting with the support of the government. Only in the past month, we had 2 anti-migrant protests in the center of Belgrade and one in front of the refugee camp in Obrenovac, which is also on the outskirts of Belgrade. This last protest in front of the refugee camp was actually organized as a support protest for a guy who only a few days before violently busted into the refugee camp with his car while yelling and threatening refugees who were inside. He was immediately arrested by the army who was guarding the camp at the time, but he was also released on the same day. These far-right groups are also visiting and demolishing refugee squads across Serbia. In 1 month, Serbia will also have parliamentary elections with only right groups running for the seats in the parliament. However, unlike other countries across Europe, left-wing and anti-fascist groups seem to be invisible in the public, which makes the life of the people on the move even harder.
I'm left over of the war reporters during the 90s. I was here in Bosnia and in the Western Balkans from 91 on, reporting about the war for 10 years until the last shot in Macedonia. So I know a little bit the situation.
First of all, we want to take a look into the situation of people on the move in those countries, but let's start specifically with Serbia, where you're based. Can you, especially for people who are maybe not familiar with the situation of people on the ground, can you tell us a little bit about the conditions people on the move are living in Serbia, their access to protection and asylum, and especially also about the challenges that they face in their everyday life?
Of course. I want to say hello first to everybody who is watching. When it comes to Serbia, Serbia is located on the Balkans. It's a country between the EU countries. So after, on this Balkan route, it comes after Greece and Bulgaria and just before Hungary and Croatia. The migrations came into the public eye in 2015, although even before 2015, thousands of people already crossed through Serbia. In 2015, we had what was called a refugee crisis, and Serbian authorities and Serbian NGOs, activists, and everybody on the field was acting as they do in crisis, in emergencies. At that time, the so-called Balkan route was open, and people were crossing, let's say, legally or with the permission of the authorities. And they reached Western Europe quite quickly. So from Greece all the way to Germany, they would reach in 2 or 3 days. When the Balkan route was closed, the situation got quite different. The people got stuck in Serbia. Some of them were in Serbia for up to 2 or 3 years. The whole time, Serbia considers itself as a transiting country. And we here are still, our authorities and service providers are still in this mindset of having an emergency and of having crisis. So Serbia did not establish any kind of functioning asylum system, nor does it provide protection. Since 2015 until today, so in 2015 we had only 5 accommodation camps in Serbia, and today we have 19 of them. These camps are considered to be transiting camps and to be just a place of accommodation for people who are transiting. Serbian authorities constantly have this narrative that Serbia is a transiting country, that nobody wants to stay here, and therefore it basically uses this fact that people don't want to stay here against them by not providing them even the basic protection. Access to asylum has gotten much worsened over the time. The number of people who are applying for asylum is very, very small, so it's less than 2% of people who are on the territory of Serbia that actually got the chance to apply for asylum and to fulfill all the rights here as asylum seekers. The situation is getting much worse because a lot of people are staying for the last 2 years in squats at the borders. There is a big squat at the border with Hungary and one big squat at the border with Croatia. In the last month, after the state of emergency was revoked due to the coronavirus, there is also a new route that leads from Serbia to Romania. So now we have refugee squats at this border as well. People who are staying in the squats, they have zero access to any kind of services. They are constantly victims of the violent pushbacks from the EU countries. They don't have access to healthcare here. In most cases, they don't have access even to accommodation, to food, to education, and to many, many other rights that they should be having the right to.
Mm-hmm. And you already started talking about what changed basically during the past few weeks when Serbia went into lockdown, and I believe you had a much stricter lockdown than, for example, we had here in Berlin. But you were actually not allowed to leave the house, I believe, and you had a curfew imposed, right? And as far as I know, this curfew was also imposed on camps. And can you talk about that for a little? What happened with people who were living in squats also at that time? And yeah, describe the situation to us.
Yeah, so in the middle of March, on the 15th of March, Serbia declared a state of emergency. And immediately the curfew was introduced. The whole population, the general population, we were not allowed to leave our houses first after 8 p.m., then after 5 p.m. Also, we were not allowed to leave our houses during the weekends. Only people who are working and who had special permissions were allowed to go out. For the refugees and people in the camps, the situation got much worse. They were not allowed to leave the camps at all. A lot of people were staying in the hostels or in the private accommodations that were run by smugglers here in Belgrade. All hostels were also closed. All squats were emptied. The police went to all of them, and all people got forced to go to the camps. We have, as I said, we have 19 camps that have capacity of 6,000 people. And when all these squats were emptied and when people were forced to go to the camps, there were around 9,000 people in the camps. So that's 3,000 over the capacities. The camps were quite full. They were not allowed to leave the camps at any reason. And none of the service providers, including legal representatives or healthcare providers, were not allowed to enter the camp. The situation inside the camp was also quite bad because they were overcrowded, so there was no means of protection from the virus. And also what was quite worrying is that all the camps were guarded by the army. Even though the army, according to the law, has no jurisdiction over these camps, but they were present and they were guarding the camps. In some situations, especially in two of the biggest camps, both of them are close to Belgrade, in Krnjac and Brenovac, there were some reports where the army used force. Some of the people tried to escape, and the army used firearms by shooting in the air, trying to scare them. There were also reports of the police, the special forces of the police entering the camps, and also some of the force was used on these locations. The state of emergency was revoked at the beginning of May, on the 6th of May. General population, we were all allowed to leave our homes, and the curfew was revoked, but for the refugees, that was not the case. The Ministry of Health gave the recommendation that the camps should remain closed, even though there were 0 cases of coronavirus in the camps. They were also not tested for the coronavirus, but officially there were no confirmed cases. But still, even after the state of emergency was revoked, they were not allowed to leave the camps.
Okay, so we have the use of force from the official side and the confinement of people in Serbia. I quickly want to jump from the violence from the official authorities to what you already touched upon in your statement earlier, the emergence of right-wing groups, not only in the political sphere, but also on the ground. You said that there's groups raiding squats, basically, and yeah, maybe you can tell us a little more for those who don't know about emergence of the right-wing extremism in Serbia.
Yes, over the last few months, or let's say a year, there's a lot of far-right groups that are emerging. The question of migration was quite big during the state of emergency and during the coronavirus. Just before the state of emergency was imposed, there were plans to reopen one new refugee camp. It's also relatively close to Belgrade. And this, the locals started protesting. They closed off the road that was leading to this camp, to this facility. The commissariat, which is a government institution running all the camps, decided not to take refugees there and not to reopen this camp. This happened just a few days before the middle of March and the corona outbreak. The locals started a small group on Facebook. However, a few days later, the state of emergency was imposed, and this led to explosion of far-right groups, and the migration somehow really got back into the public eye, but this time in a very negative way. This Facebook group in just 2 weeks had more than 300,000 members. It's very active. It's calling for the violence. It represents people on the move as rapists, as murderers, as somebody who came here wanting to take our land, wanting to kill us all. There were a lot of conspiracy theories that the curfew was imposed on the general population in the whole country because the government wants to give away our land and bring millions of people from other countries. This also led, only a few days after the state of emergency was revoked, we had one very aggressive incident where a man who is also a member of the local municipality, so the member of the local government here in Belgrade, but he's also a member of the far-right group. He actually bursted into the Obrenovac refugee camp. He tried to burst in by trying to demolish the fence with his car. When he was not able to do that, then he went to the main gate and just bursted in, driving past the military who was still in the camp and the police officers. At this time, he was yelling anti-refugee patrols, that he doesn't want foreigners here, he doesn't want people of different race and different religion here. He was arrested, but then he was released on the same day. And this was presented as, luckily nobody got hurt, but this was presented in media and by the government official as a very small and insignificant incident. A few days later, the people from the same group that he is a member of, the far-right groups, organized a protest in front of the camp, also giving the support to their member and saying that they don't want a refugee camp here in Belgrade. And even though the police has the authority to forbid any kind of public gatherings, they did not do it. The first weekend after the state of emergency was revoked, we had two protests, both on Saturday and Sunday, in the city center here in Belgrade. And one of the main issue of these protests is that people don't want migrants and refugees in Serbia. Also, these protests were not forbidden, and nobody was held responsible. There were 2 attacks on refugees, again by the far-right groups, at the border with Romania. This route with Romania, as I said, was opened just after the state of emergency was revoked, so in the last month. And there were incidents of these people going to the squads, threatening refugees, telling them that they have to leave Serbia immediately. This was posted online on social media, and again, there was no response from the government. And all of this happened in just 1 month.
Wow. Crazy. And scary at the same time, I must say, really. So, Erich, I want to bring you in here. I suppose that you muted your video because of the connection, but I hope that you can still hear us. So I want to go back to 2018, basically, when so the borders closed, or like they were more controlled 2015, when the majority of people still passed through Serbia, but then those movements slightly changed in 2018, and there was a larger influx of people into Bosnia and Herzegovina from Serbia, but also from other countries. Can you talk a little bit about how the Bosnian authorities, and I know it is less centralized and complex in Bosnia, but how did they deal with the situation, and which role did the EU play in how they handled that?
Yeah, let me a little bit tell more 2015-16. In this time, when the people came on this Balkan route, Bosnia was aside. This went through, the people went through Macedonia, Greece, Turkey, this direction, then through Serbia, then to Croatia, Slovenia, and then into the West. It was even well organized. None of this country wanted to have those people in the country. They wanted just to get rid of them, and so they organized somehow even railroads, buses, and whatever. Also in Croatia was perfectly organized, the buses and railroad to Slovenia. So nobody spent more than 24 hours in Croatia because they organized it to come through and to get rid of it. This was their basic idea at Then finally there was this stop. Macedonia, they stopped the whole process. This was introduced by the Austrian government, Mr. Kurz, and so on, also of Brussels. And finally, we had this situation that some of these people were stuck there. In Macedonia, in Serbia, in Croatia, and so. But finally, they let them go through a little bit, dropping somehow. Bosnia was still aside. As then 2016 came this treaty between Turkey. People tried individually coming from maybe Slovenia, Montenegro, Bosnia, to come to Croatia, which was then the European Union. And so this was the idea of some people, and they developed, let's say, an undercode with organizations behind. Also, they organized this. The people from on the move, like you said, were not without money. So some of them were not without money. There were people who had really also money, where they could pay bribing the policemen and so on. In Bosnia, the beginning, 2016-17, when it started, more or less, more people came in. The population was had sympathy with these migrants because of remember the own time the time of the war, when half of the population was refugees somehow, and some for them, and people sent some food or into them to come in Sarajevo and sleep there for a night or so. But attitude came to an end also when the people came in, and when there was when the Croats started with the Croatian police started to beat these people, came border, and to take away the money and take away the smartphones and so on. Anyway, from 2000 on, 1,000 people on the move were registered. And we have now about 7,000 in the country. So for 33,000, this is officially, because the other the legal people, non-registered people are not counted. They understood, the people, mostly Muslims, that they have the Muslim areas in Bosnia. Because of Republika Srpska from the beginning, they don't.
Erich?
Yeah, Erich, I think we lost you. Can you still hear us?
Okay.
Okay.
I think otherwise you just
now you're back on. Erich, 1 second. We didn't
will
hear you
not
for
give-
like a couple of seconds. Maybe you could pick up your last sentence and continue.
Okay. I think Erich doesn't hear us, to be honest. Maybe we can try to continue. Maybe we just but I wasn't muted before. Okay, wait. So now you hear me, right? Now you hear me, right? Okay, perfect. So could you quickly comment on the complex relation between the countries of the Western Balkan and the EU? I know it's kind of like difficult to see the area or even the country itself as like one entity. I'm well aware of that. But maybe you can describe like this conflict between the aspiration of kind of joining the EU, but at the same time, huge hesitation to do so due to, like, I would say, grown mistrust in the EU bureaucracy. Yeah, how do you see that, like, this tension field?
Do we have Erich? No, I think he's tuning.
Erich, are you back? Can you hear us?
Okay.
Maybe later on.
Okay, maybe then we just like continue with your question first, and then we
okay.
continue.
I think now you're back. Erich, can you unmute yourself? You're still muted.
Yeah.
I shall mute it.
Yeah,
so now we can hear you. Okay, we lost you for about a minute or so, so maybe you can you can pick up your last thought.
Okay,
and,
I will come to this point
and
of the
maybe
European
one second, Erich. Maybe it will improve the quality if you turn off your video and we just use the audio.
Yeah, okay, stop video.
Hopefully, yeah.
I hear you. Do you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, then let me. Wild camps like Vučjak, and Vučjak became famous because of the circumstances there. Only the local Red Cross support them, and some volunteers from Germany and Austria came there and helped these people. But Dirk Planert, for example, also this is one of a former colleague, who organized then medical assistance and so on. Also very brave and very good. But this Vučjak was a catastrophe, and the other camps were Bira they were crowded, too much people in there. So then in autumn they decided to dissolve Vučjak, but didn't offer an alternative. As the people had to go then somehow in the woods or forests or whatever. The IOM, the International Organization of Migration, they at first they did not were not able to build other refugee camps because of the communities did not allow them to build a camp on their ground. So this was already the turnaround, the aggression against the migrants or people who move. They did not want this. But the winter came last winter, and so at least by assistance of the German government, I have to say, they renovated the barracks of the army in Sarajevo, and there was space. It was quite okay conditions to overcome the winter, but most of the people who came from Vučjak or others were transported to there. They wanted to go back, even in the bad circumstances, to the border because they still had the hope to come somehow to Europe. I have met some of these people, young men, very ambitious, speaking English pretty well, had the dream how to live better somehow in Western Europe and so on. Of the same dreams, more or less, to study and to do something and to be free also from their from what was concerning their heritage, not only that because of political oppression in their countries, also because of this oppression by religion and all this. This differed. This is also a difference to 2014-15. In 2015, were a lot of religious people who came, families, traditional families with traditional petit bourgeois attitudes. But these people now, they are more or less young men, ambitious, and they want something. And they will not give up. Everybody told me they will not give up. So this is then, after this was covered up more or less, the EU supported Croatia in doing what they did to stop this possibility to come into the EU. They want also to be Schengen and so on. And so they got also some support for the police and the equipment and so on. Suddenly in Bosnia, in BiH, the committee cried and begged from Sarajevo and other parts of Bosnia, but they did enough distance, and this is due to the complicated political system, which is divided into entities, but all in the entities also above all in the Croatian Bosniak, in the federation, they have different cantons, and in cantons, the ruler, they acted in a different way. And also one canton did not want to assist the other canton because it's a poor country also, and they only expected from the EU and from IOM to get some money for the assistance and for food and supplying somehow people on move, and how much was disappeared, who knows. We know all these problems with corruption. Anyway, so then Corona showed up, and suddenly everything was even worse. This was still winter. In March, Bosnia is the mountain, it's in the mountains, and it's cold, and snow, and so they were not allowed to go to the border anymore. The police, the Bosnian police now, beforehand did not attack the migrants. They started to attack the migrants themselves. And this was due to the Minister of Interior, or let's say the security minister of the central state, Fahrudin Radonjic, who said we cannot, who was the manager for the, this I have to admit, this Radonjic managed the corona problem pretty well. That's why Bosnia has a low rate of infected people, 1,700 or something like this. This is a very low rate in you think about almost 4 million people. And in Croatia also, they managed this in respect to this problem pretty well. But also from this side of view, it was necessary to control the people in the camps. And this they did, but in the way they did, this is not human. If you explain this and say, okay, people, you have to be in now because of this is dangerous if you are running around and so on, then everybody would understand. But how they did partially was really rough. And this I don't like in this way. And then Radonjic had the idea, because of Pakistan, most of these young men are from Pakistan now. And he demanded from the Pakistan government to take back these people, the Pakistani. They had thrown away their passports or whatever. Yeah, they said this is the counter strategy. But, you know, one can recognize people from Pakistan somehow. This is really easy to do. And also a difference to Afghanistan. And in this conflict, all the conflicts broke up within Bosnia also, because the National Party of the Bosniaks, they have good relationships to the powers of the Islamic community, and they wanted to keep it and not to and they stopped Radonjic. He resigned last week because of he could not get through with this idea that Pakistan takes back some people. So I have written 2 years ago already about the perspective, what will happen to all these people, what will happen to this underground railroad here to Western Europe. And I think that with the action of the European Union to stop all emigration, Bosnia will be a kind of Libya, because there will always come people through Serbia and Montenegro, and somehow they will trigger in somehow. So, but from Bosnia, there is not a way out anymore. Before it was. From the 40,000 registered they're called refugees, 33,000 made it over the border, and only 7,000 stayed back. This one has to see. That's why they could have the dream. But now this dream is over, because it's more restricted now, and also because of the corona. Nobody wants to take them. Also, for example, Italian farmers, orange or apple farm or something in South Tyrol. It was time, I met some people, a Pakistan guy. He organized for himself a job in South Tyrol already when he was in Pakistan. So he made it with an airplane to Serbia, and he made it to BiH, and said, this guy gave me sent me 1,000 euros that I can bribe the Croatian policeman, and then come into and work then on his farm as a yeah. And such things happened also. This is so strange. It has a lot of phases, the whole problem. But what is now with the corona, this is also completely stopped.
So there's a lot of more restrictions, definitely. And I mean, that thought of like creating something like another Libya in Bosnia, that is truly terrifying on all ends. And let's move from here on with our next question. Sonia, I believe you that have that for us.
Yeah, exactly.
Now I don't understand anything.
No, okay. So Milica, I just hear myself.
I don't hear anything.
I don't hear you.
Okay, now we got
there
it.
We go. Okay.
Okay, sorry, now we got. I think now you should hear me, right?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Then I start again, fourth time for the question.
Yes, I hear you.
I have the question for Milica now. So can you kind of try to comment quickly? I know it's really complex, but comment quickly on the kind of relation of Serbian society, of Serbian politics towards the EU, because we kind of see there's like a tension between the aspiration of wanting to become member of the EU, also like maybe some values that are seen as being European, but also like a general frustration with the EU, with your EU values. How do you perceive that? And like maybe you can also span the boat towards the meaning, but what does it mean for the migration, like in this perspective?
Mm-hmm. Well, the question of the joining the EU is on the table in Serbia for a very long time now, for almost 20 years. I think that unfortunately the people here in Serbia, when the question of joining the EU is a mistake, they don't think and they don't see it as, they don't think about European values. They see it mainly as an economic advantage, as joining the EU will open the borders, it will bring in the capital, it will allow people of Serbia to go and live in European countries more easily. Serbia and Bosnia and all the countries in the region that are not members of the EU, we have a very huge number of people, especially young, educated people who want to go and live in other countries. So joining the EU will make all of this possible. Generally, the public here in Serbia, you always have this on one side, there is EU and the benefits that it brings, but then on the other side, then on the other side we have Russia and China and this like wishing to become allies of the East, and somehow it's presented as these two, let's say, allies are in international relations are excluding each other. In the terms of migration, definitely a lot of funds in accession to the EU are being shifted to migrations. All of these 14 camps that were opened from 2015 until today were funded by the EU. I tried to find the information about the exact number of euros that entered Serbia that was donated or that was applied for as a project. I expected to find this information, but apparently the Serbian government is not as transparent as it should be. So this information is not public, but a lot of money definitely entered Serbia. Both Asylum Office, which is part of the Ministry of Interior and is in charge for asylum procedure, and Commissariat for Refugees, which is in charge for the accommodation camps, hired a lot of new staff. They received a lot of funds also to improve their logistics. We expect, according to some plans and some documents of the government that are available, that the Serbia will join Dublin even before it joins the European Union. The Serbia will be the first country to join Dublin before joining the EU. Even some estimations is that it will happen in the period of 2 years. If Serbia joins Dublin, that will have a huge effect on the migrations, since then all the member states will have the possibility to return people back to Serbia as being the first country where they entered and being the country in charge for their asylum claims.
Okay, thank you. What about, like, maybe I can turn to you, Erich, and ask you pretty much the same question concerning the society in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Like, how do you see this? Is it also like a conflict between this want to be like part of the EU, but also the frustration? I mean, like, the European Union kind of is stuck in this never-ending course of accession negotiation and then not negotiation. I mean, you have this example of North Macedonia. But how is it in Bosnia? How does the society? What relation does the society have towards the EU, and is there like a trend how it's changed in the last years? I have to ask you though for a quick comment because we kind of like already run in time, so I might interrupt you at some point.
a quick comment for a very complicated topic.
I know. That's why I said it right away.
Okay, let's say it like this: the majority of population, all sides, all groups or national groups or whatever, how one can call them. I don't say ethnic groups, but it's just one ethnic group. This is South Slavs. This is not a difference. But you have these differences there, which is very complicated to explain, but I just say this. And also some power structures that are based on nationalism. And the majority of population, they want to join Europe, and not only because of it's nice to be in European Union, also because they expect the rule of law. The rule of law means that everybody who is corrupt or whatever has problems, will have problems, like in Croatia, the former Prime Minister Sanader, who had gotten a verdict of jail for 7-8 years or something. And this was frightening the nationalistic elites, because of if they really go into the path of integration, then they can expect to be in jail, because everybody of them is involved in big corruption. And they say they are nationalists. In reality, they use nationalism for the power structure and let's say, and also for the private, so for the private income. So this is very, so they say always, we want to go to Europe, but in reality, above all, from Serbian side and from Croatian side, also they block, because the leaders were, and also in Sarajevo, in the National Party in Sarajevo, also the Muslim Party, SDR, they also are very suspicious about it. They want to join together, somehow they make business with the Chinese and Erdogan and such things. They think there is also a perspective for them. And the leadership, there's always invited. Bakir Izetbegovic is a good friend with Erdogan and so on. So you have then in this Serbian part is they are pro-Putin and pro-Vucic. Also Vucic is even more democratic than this Banja Luka leadership. And they think they have a perspective with Russia. And the Croatian side, they want to divide the federation and get a part of Bosnia just to make an end to this state. So Serbian part goes to Serbia, Croatian part to Croatia, and then you have the middle somehow left over of multinational society, majority Muslims. And this is not a basis in which one can go to Europe. This is not possible in this. That's why the international community and also Europe has to do something to change the constitution in Bosnia and Herzegovina to make it to a real state, a democratic state in which it is possible to implement reforms in the sector of, let's say, juridical system, the sector of economy, and so on, to make it function as a state. And then, when it is function, then you can have steps to get closer to EU, because then you have a lot of work to do in respect of economy, of the laws, of and so on. You know. Mm-hmm. You have to overtake the laws of the EU and so on. And this is then not so easy to realize. And I fear that we are in Bosnia. Bosnia is trapped. Bosnia is in chain. Bosnia is ruled by nationalistic, let's say, corrupt people. And the population wants the contrary. And I see also the resistance is coming up now stronger than it was before.
Maybe we can look at like the resistance later if we still have time. So I would like thank you for the comment, both of you, and I give back to Marlena.
Yeah, I want to stay with I want to stick to the EU relationship for one more minute, and I'm going to ask this question first to Milica, and then maybe Erich, you can have we can also have your input on that. I know that several politicians use this phrase, but I think it's Aleksandar Vučić who really coined it, that Serbia will not be a parking lot, quote unquote, for refugees and migrants. But when we look at Hungary and when we look at Croatia and the brutality with which they enforce the EU borders, what leverage does the Serbian government have with regards to that? What choice do they have?
Yes, our President Vučić uses this term, saying that will not be a parking lot for the refugees. So that basically with this statement, they are announcing and giving the legality and legitimacy to potential pushbacks from Serbia as well. We have constant this narrative: if the EU doesn't want them, then we also don't want them. If EU is breaching their laws, then we should also breach our laws and not allowing them to stay here. This will also be extremely visible now with the new Frontex agreement with Serbia. The Frontex agreement is signed. The English version of the text is available online. We are now waiting for the agreement to go to the Serbian parliament to be officially adopted by our state, and then the agreement will come into force. This whole agreement basically says that the Frontex will be in Serbia to protect the member states, to fight the illegal migrations and to prevent people to enter the EU. According to the text of the agreement, it seems like it's not likely that they will protect the Serbian borders from the south and east Serbian borders. It's very likely that they will be in Serbia, but to protect EU borders, so that they will be at the border with Croatia, with Hungary, and Romania. So basically to keep people in Serbia, not to keep them from entering Serbia. What is especially worrying is that the officers of Frontex will be allowed to use weapons, they will be allowed to use guns, and they will be stripped of criminal responsibility under the Serbian laws. The second part is extremely worrying. When you read this agreement, you have a feeling like they're protecting Serbia from an army, from the war, and not from civilians and refugees coming only with their backpacks. Why do you need guns? Why do you need people who will not be responsible for criminal charges? So basically, we'll have the situation where the Frontex officers will be allowed to beat refugees, to take their belongings, to torture them, to even kill them in some situations, and they will not be held responsible in front of the Serbian courts. What people tend to forget when we're talking about this situation is that this is not just about the refugees. These Frontex officers, they will be here in Serbia 24 hours. They will have contact with Serbian local population as well. So will they deal with their everyday problems and situations with local population in the same way? So should locals be worried about their presence here? And the fact that basically they can do here whatever they want. So I'm afraid that Serbia will become a parking lot. Our government and our system is doing everything possible to keep people out of the asylum system. Serbia also announced that we will sign readmission agreements with the most common countries of origin. That should happen by the end of this year. We will sign readmission agreement with Iraq, with Afghanistan, Algeria, Morocco, so all the countries where most refugees come from. For example, with Afghanistan, we don't have international relations since late 70s, so for more than 40 years, and now suddenly this readmission agreement pops up as like the most urgent thing. I'm afraid that so far Serbia did not deport people back to their countries of origin, but only because we didn't have the funds to do so. Now I'm afraid that if the funds come, the Serbian government will do it. With the new law on foreigners that came into force at the end of 2018, the deportation procedure is very shortened. There are no proper procedural guarantees. People don't have, for example, people don't have the right to free legal help. They don't have access to a lawyer, and they can be very easily and very quickly deported back only if the funds come.
Okay, thank you for that. Erich, if you also want to comment on that, and I think you want to.
Yes.
We have another question for you after that. So yeah.
Okay,
go ahead.
Just for this. When this is now what Milica said fits to this what I said beforehand. It crystallizes. We are lifting a little bit the curtain of the new EU strategy. What they want is not only to control the Croatian border and Hungary and so on, so nobody can go through. Also in these countries like Bosnia and Serbia, to prevent people to come in and to stay also for a longer time. Because, okay, Vucic does not have an interest, or Serbia has their interest, and so too many people will stay in Serbia. If the borders are closed and they are sticking there, then they want at least some money compensation until there is a solution. I think this is the strategy which is behind it, to send the people then back. What Radončić openly said, this is somehow behind the curtain, and more or less is now lifted. The Frontex in Serbia, Frontex doesn't exist in Bosnia until now because Republika Srpska doesn't want any other police which is not controlled by Dodik himself, so at the borders. But we will see how long. It's only a question of money, I think. And then if they get the money, then this is then finally a new blockade for people on the move to reach their dreamland, Western Europe.
Then actually, the next question I'm having for you, Erich, is pretty much goes right in the same direction, because I mean, there's also, of course, maybe it's just a question of money, but there's also kind of politicians who say, okay, we don't want this European money if it's like turns us into this like quote unquote parking lot. So for example, the Albanian Prime Minister Rama said that the overall idea of externalizing the EU asylum procedures is dangerous to the people on the move, to Albania, and also to European itself. And also he made the link saying it shouldn't happen, that there is a link between the access negotiation to the EU and the asylum issues, which is now made all the time actually. So like if there is some kind of a quid pro quo, then they better don't want to the whole negotiation process to be speeding up, but just to be slow, because that's not what should be linked. So I mean, this only having this one quote, it seems like there definitely is people, and there's politicians and there's also part of society who see this link between the European externalization management and kind of oh yeah, if you want to be in the EU, you kind of have to like go with what the EU says. So maybe you can comment on that, like looking on the whole area pretty much.
Yeah, what I said before, this is the strategy behind the curtain. And these politicians, they know this already. So that's why Radonjic expressed this very clearly. One has also to understand, and that's why most of the population is supporting these approaches, because of they don't want, these are very vulnerable states, also Albania or Kosovo, there are a lot of problems and so on. Also Northern Macedonia. These are very vulnerable states because of these are poor states, cannot afford to be in the frame of the Dublin process and laws, and this is for them not affordable, except get a lot of money. This, I fear, this money will disappear in some and not reach the people what it was spent, it was given. This is also a big problem. It's just this combination of power and corruption in all these cases, and people will become rich. And so about this, what EU will spend for resolving the problem. But the resolving the problem is not to help the people to organize or make the states able to send them back, to get rid of them, and to block any movement from direction Turkey to Western Europe.
Okay. Thank you for that. We have to speed up a little bit because we still want to open the floor for a couple of questions from the audience. But before we do that, we want to go to a different level again and see a bit how EU migration policies and externalization impact civil society in Serbia and Bosnia. And I mean, we already talked a bit about the emergence of right-wing groups or like the strengthening of right-wing groups in Serbia. Milica, you also do work outside of Belgrade. You also do work in Šid and in Subotica, which are towns close to the Croatian and the Hungarian borders. And especially Šid is a very small town, actually, with quite few people, but a lot of people who are living there to try to cross the border into Croatia. And my question is, maybe you can tell us a little bit about how migration, and I mean, it's not a new phenomenon in Serbia. It has been there long before 2015. How does it resonate with society? How has that changed, and how can right-wing groups exploit that? Keep it brief. I know it's a long question, but I think it's important that we talk about it.
It's also the situation changed quite dramatically in 2015 when Serbia had this position of a country that welcomes refugees. There were all these positive presentation of the refugees and migration generally. All NGOs that were involved in a lot of new NGOs opened at this time out of activists and volunteers. Refugees who were already active in this field, they had a huge number of volunteers. So citizens of all ages wanted to help. They brought food, clothes, everything in assisting people. Now the situation is completely opposite. There is not so much activists, there is not so much volunteers. The local population is now not so welcoming. They can see that this is a situation that lasts for 5 years. And again, you have this influence that these are economic migrants, that these are people who are just here to look for a job, that these are terrorists undercover, and so on. Generally, the problem is that in 2015, the women and children were more visible than they are today. Here in Serbia, we do have women and children. They're mostly in the camps. They are not in squats, and they are not so visible on the streets. But also people forget that the countries where the most people come from, like Afghanistan, Pakistan, even Syria and Iraq, are very traditional countries. People in Afghanistan, women are not so visible. They don't have so many problems like the men do. Especially young men, they are under the threats of the Taliban, they are under the threats of the government of Afghanistan, and they really do not have other options than to escape. People also forget the road that these people take in order to get here. Honestly, very, very few number of people are doing all this just to get a better job or just to be on social care in some member state. In 2015, we talked more about the situation in Greece, about the number of people who died trying to reach European Union. All of these people, they do have the possibility to go back to their country. So they can go back from Greece to Afghanistan or from Serbia to Afghanistan. And they're not doing this not because they want to reach European countries to have a job, but really because their life is in danger there. I know a lot of people with us in Click Active. We had a young boy, man, he's 20-something. He worked as interpreter for us. And he finished university in Afghanistan. And he had a great job. He worked in Kabul, and he was very well set in economic terms. And then when we talked about his situation and what he will do when he reaches Germany, he said, I know that I cannot work as he has an IT degree. And he said, I know that I cannot work as an engineer like I did in Kabul, but perhaps I can be a truck driver in Germany. So you have a lot of these cases of people who know that they will live in, like, the standard-wise and economic-wise, they will go down compared to the life they had in Afghanistan. Of course, yes, you have a lot of people coming from poor countries, coming from poor societies, but this is really not the reason why they are escaping.
Thank you so much again for talking about that. I think it's something that also, especially the media rally, mentions. Yeah, we have to speed it up a little bit because we still have questions from the audience that we want to ask. But Erich, I want to get back to one thing that you mentioned in the very beginning. You already talked about the solidarity that was there in the beginning in Bosnia, and you also started talking about the changes, the resistance to the current situation, and maybe you want to elaborate on that a little bit to look a bit into like the positive aspects in the future that there might be.
Yeah, I don't see so many positive aspects with respect to this problem, but as still we have this mood in Bosnia, above all in this Bosniak dominated areas. If you see the people in Tuzla, for example, they are camping at the bus station. And my wife comes from Tuzla, that's why I know a little bit how people are acting. And so Tuzla population is not very rich, but a lot of people bring some food and something, still to help these people. And this was also in BiH, but in BiH is a smaller town with 7,000. As it is also still there. When I think who gave the food for the Red Cross in BiH? It's also population, out of the population. They organized it somehow. And also in Sarajevo, when I was before still in Sarajevo, people, so Afghanistan people, they
Erich, we can't hear you.
Taschentücher, also das Papier eine Marame. Ja, also so die verkaufen dann, they sell something and in the streets, small like this or cigarettes, or cigarettes is dangerous. Not cigarettes, but so. And then the people buy it and give it back. Also give a mark and don't take what they have to sell.
But, yeah.
And so this kind of solidarity is still there in a way which doesn't make it now. It's a lot of aggression. I say in BiH maybe because it was too much above all for young women. This is Europeans. They want to go to meet other their girlfriends and have a coffee, but then always surrounded by hundreds of young men. This is not possible. So there is more aggression building up against these people. But the civil society is not very active to this problem. One has just to say, because the civil society anyway is weak. It shows sometimes, like in last demonstration against this, when the
commemoration service,
commemoration to Bleiburg, or also other topics, it comes up also Sarajevo is pro-Tito still, and that's why we have still the Tito Boulevard in the center of the city and so on. So this multinational spirit is still there, but in respect to the people on move, it is not developed. Mm-hmm. I cannot say that one organizes. There are some people who are organizing. For example, a lady who was living in Germany for 30 years came back. Now she is a pensionist, and she is organizing refugees. She's organizing, she's controlling also situation in the Sarajevo camps, and some people, but not very many. Not very many.
We have some other questions. Okay. I'm sorry to interrupt, but we have only 15 minutes left, and we got quite some questions from the audience, and actually, also some interesting input, and we really want to share them with you. Maybe Sonja, go ahead.
I'm gonna start with the first one. There's actually like Milica, it's to you, and it pretty much fits to the one you were talking on before, but it's like now concerning Belgrade itself. So the question is there remaining support from the Belgradian civil society when before people became to be locked down in closed camps and in spite of the right-wing movements? So I think it's like, I mean, you talked about it before, but more on whole Serbia, so maybe you can like specify on Belgrade.
That is a difficult question. Unfortunately, a lot of very significant civil society organizations withdrew its funds from Serbia in general. For example, MSF had its clinic in Belgrade, which is quite visited, and there was a huge need for it. Because, as I said, people who were pushed back from EU states don't have access to Serbian, to hospitals and Serbian healthcare. So all of them went to this clinic. Other, like small local civil society organizations, unfortunately, most of them are still in this emergency crisis mode. They are mostly focusing in providing humanitarian help, like providing food, shoes, clothes, giving some organizations are providing, for example, lessons in English or in other foreign languages to refugees. But there is no support in integration, and there is no, almost none of the society organizations are dealing as a bridge between refugees and state authorities. We have a lot of problem with the state authorities not stepping up. A huge number of unaccompanied minors are not granted guardian. They're staying in squats, they're staying in the streets and outside of the system. People who are trying to get registered and to go legally into the camps are not being allowed to do so. There is a big gap in education. A lot of children don't have access to it. So there is a huge list of problems that needs to be dealt with, and unfortunately, most NGOs are not stepping in and serving as this bridge. Mostly because, as I said, everybody sees Serbia as a transiting country and probably see like there is no point in making a system when nobody wants to stay here. Unfortunately, I just have to say one more thing that is not directly related to the question, but in these terms of no, we are just transiting country, nobody will stay. From my experience, when people are allowed to start asylum procedure, when they do get some kind of protection, when they do get this ID card, when you see that they have access to some services, that they have some rights here, And when they do get protection, when they get the refugee status, a lot of them actually decides to stay. I know majority of them did left, but a lot of them stayed here for years and years. So if we would have the functioning system, I think that Serbia will not be just a transiting country.
Okay, so let's continue with our next question from the audience. So this goes to both speakers, but I'm afraid we have to keep it really brief and really like just have a quick comment on that. So what it says is, knowing that the situation got more difficult with the corona pandemic, how do you see the future European externalization politics evolving in Serbia and Bosnia? How will that affect the people on the move?
I think we can
almost
start
impossible to have a short answer on that, but
I think we can start a new webinar on that, but maybe
yes.
maybe 2 or 3 sentences, just like how do you expect the future concerning this question? Erich, you want to start?
Yeah, okay, we have described already the situation. I don't see that there is a lot of empathy and a lot of sympathy for the people on move. This was above all in Germany and Austria, other countries also. This mood went away. The governments, all of the governments, are afraid that this will support right-wing movements in their own countries. And so I don't see that one will come to a real consistent policy. The Green Party started something like this with the contingents and give a legal pipe for immigration. But all these attempts, they are also now very quiet. The Green Party is about this very quiet. For 2 years ago, they were louder about this problem. And so I don't see really improvement of the situation for these people. Always, everybody who goes this way now is in great danger, will stay in great danger. It will be stopped, it will be in some local, in some camps, they will be in without real medical treatment, they suffer hunger, also some of them at least, and so on. This is a very very bad situation for these people, and there is no perspective anymore for them to reach their aim.
Milica, do you want to also comment on that negative notion?
Well, definitely the externalization will go in the same direction like it has until now. They will, I'm sure that the European will try to keep people in Bosnia and Serbia, but also in other countries outside of the EU, like Turkey and Libya. When it comes to specifically Serbia and Bosnia, I think that there will be expectations from the EU. They will give donations, they will give funds to these 2 countries to keep people here, to stop them from going to the European Union. They will probably expect Serbia and Bosnia to deal with these issues of migrations, either by returning people back to their home countries or by giving them protection and integrating them here. I'm not sure that Serbian and Bosnian governments will do that anytime soon. And when it comes to the question, how will that affect the people on the move, people will still try to cross the border and to reach European Union. Not because they are some sort of economic trip and to reach wealthy countries, but because they really don't have other options. Here, they don't have access to any kind of protection, to any kind of life, so they have nothing to lose, and they will try to cross over and over until at the end they succeed. Or if they don't succeed, and basically we have also a lot of that cases at the EU border. So I think those are the two options for people here.
There is one short question. I think, Milica, you can answer that quite quickly. That came from the audience. It's about squats. And the question is if those are tolerated by the authorities or if people are regularly brought to official camps, and specifically before the corona pandemic.
In general, these squats were tolerated by the authorities. If people are in the squats, especially those at the borders, it means that they will leave Serbia, that they will go to other countries, and that Serbian authorities will not have to deal with these cases. However, from time to time, we've had cases where there were different squats, and then they get tolerated for some time, for a few months or even years. And then the police, without any warning, they just come and they arrest people, they push them back, they take them to camps. So any of these situations happened, and then these squads get demolished.
Okay, then we have one last question to you, Erich, and then we have to actually come to the end of the event. The audience said, I was in BiH a couple of times, and I'm still in touch with some migrants. One of them was forced into a bus in BiH a few days ago and taken to a new camp in Lipa with mass tents. Police are collecting everybody from the streets and ruins now. My info is that there is no humanitarian organization left there. Even the local team of SOS BiH is not permitted to help anymore. Is that still the case? Do you know that?
I fear so. To Lipa, the people don't want to go because it's far away from the border. And so let's say not so far away, but at least 60, 70 kilometers from the border. And so the migrants don't want to go there. On the other hand, they are forced to go there. The police is now pretty harsh. And also, there is a minimum of, I think the IOM is somehow active, but there's the people who volunteered to help the refugees. They are dangerous for all these institutions, and the big policy, because of they still insist on human rights. And when I think how I am so ashamed that we are not able to take 500 children from this camp in Greece, in spite of the fact that we Germans promised this, that we are not able to do this. How can this? How will be a sympathy or a possibility for these young Afghan, Pakistani, Moroccans, and so on, who now come, who are ambitious and also well-educated person? They are, at the moment, I'm very pessimistic about their future.
Okay, so I really want to thank both of you, Milica and Erich, for this interesting discussion. I think we could talk much longer, and I hope there will be the possibility to proceed at some point, maybe even here. I also want to thank the audience for listening and for commenting. And also this was possible, like this event was made possible through a cooperation by Borderline Europe with the Bildungswerk der Heinrich-Böll-Stiftung, which is financed by the Lotto Stiftung. And we also want to thank all people for making this possible. And yeah, you want to also say last words?
Yeah, last words maybe. Maybe also there is a digital photo exhibition which describes or gives more of a visual impression of living conditions of people in the region. You can find the event on Facebook. It's still going to be available online. Yeah, please have a look. And also from me, thank you so much for joining in, and thanks to our amazing guests.
Thank you for having us.
Bye-bye for now. And yeah, let's continue this discussion at another point.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.